To order. This is the LIFT meeting, Thursday, October 11th, 2018. The time is 6:32. We will start with roll call. Carol Brezjak.
Here.
Cindy Christensen.
Here.
Jason Henderson. Not here. William Hopping will not be here. Joseph Areno. Here. Jack Reinchecke.
Here.
And Kevin Seiler is here. We have the agenda in front of us. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
We approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
I do have discussion. I would like a motion to add a few things. Sorry for late things. Some things have come up. I want to add a standing item of communication so I can share with the board whenever we have some emails. There are a few I'd like to share tonight. I would like to add a new business. There was a city council that made a request I'd like to discuss with you. And also a discussion if anybody will be attending the Urban Renewal Authority training or session down in Pueblo in November. So can I have a motion to add those three items?
Would you like to add them on the?
We also need to add approval of the agenda because it's missing. But so approval of the agenda would come in after roll call. Communication would be a new item after financial report, and that will be a standing item going forward. And then the other two requests would be new business.
Mr. Chair, just so I understand, I take it you want to
add the communication item as sort of a regular agenda item for the future, but because we haven't given the full 24 hours notice, anything that you're going to do with that tonight will just be a report from you.
Okay.
And then it will be on subsequent agendas. And the same I would recommend with the council items. You could certainly report on a conversation you had with the council, but the board itself cannot discuss it because it's not properly noticed. But you can certainly report on it,
Okay.
and then in subsequent meetings, it would then be agendized for full board discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I have one comment, Steve? I was looking real quick to see if I had my bylaws. Isn't our agenda laid out in the bylaws? And if we need to change the agenda layout, aren't the bylaws what we need to be amending? But I would have to check to make sure that they're, I know at one time the agenda format was in the bylaws.
You, Commissioner Bezak, members of the commission, you could certainly amend your bylaws, but I think for purposes, the Colorado Open Meetings Law provides that board members can make a report, and you could add additional items. So my advice would be make the reports tonight. From now on, those would be added as additional items. If we need to amend the bylaws, we can bring that back for an agenda item as well.
So is there a motion to add those items as a reports?
I move to amend the motion
Okay.
to include line items for review of the agenda as a standing item in the future.
But I think it's just it's missing on this.
Yeah, okay, I'm missing, okay. And then the communication, adding communications as bullet 5.5, adding training in the city council initiative under new business.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Vote on the original motion to accept the board, the agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes. We have we'll start with the August 9th, since we did not have them last time. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes from our August 9th, 2018 meeting? So moved. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of accepting the August 9th, 2018 minutes, signify by saying aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving to the September 13th, 2018 minutes, I have a motion to accept those minutes.
So moved.
Second? Second. Any discussion regarding those minutes? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of accepting the September 13, 2018 minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are now in the first session of public comment. We invite those in the public who wish to come forward and provide any comments they have. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And for the record, please state your name. Is there anybody who wishes to come forward at this time?
I'll make this quick. My name is Linda Knufiki from the 4th District. I suggest Lyft address repaying its debt to the City of Littleton in 2009 when it is contractually due to the city. The city has loaned Lyft 3 installments of $50,000 for a total of $150,000 plus interest. So as described in the contract that you signed with the city, I would find a copy of the contract and review the implications for the 2019 budget. I also heard in previous meetings talks about returning sales taxes to the city that Lyft is using for administrative expenses from the previous Santa Fe, North Broadway, and Littleton Boulevard urban renewal areas. It's a good time to address this right now because you're talking about budget, and it also might be a good question to address with the potential attorneys as to whether it's legal to keep sales tax revenues from other urban renewal areas to fund LIFT's administrative expenses when the Columbine Square Urban Renewal Plan is the only urban renewal plan in the city. So thank you, and hope you have a good meeting.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to come forward?
Good evening, my name is Lisa Sacre. I live in District 1, which is very much affected by the LIFT board and by the Columbine Square development. I had not planned to talk tonight until this was brought to my attention. This is my first time seeing this. I don't get the Littleton Independent, and this seems to be your only notification as well as here. I don't come to this building unless I'm visiting the Littleton Police Citizen Academy or for council or for this, so I wouldn't have seen either one. So I guess I'm upset at the fact that this was only a one-time shot, maybe 2 times, and this wasn't posted on Facebook, which I do get the City of Littleton Facebook notifications, and I see others things, so I'm just like wondering why there wasn't more opportunity for this to be posted. It does give the perception that you're trying to be sly. I'm starting to see some other things that I'm wondering, you know, like is things, some shenanigans are happening in the backside that we're not aware of, and that I'm just concerned. So I'll leave it at that, and I would appreciate more notice. Had I not met up with another coworker or another friend, I would have not even known this was going to be talked tonight. So I need to have more forewarning. And I'm pretty tech savvy, so I do plug in. I don't get into Nextdoor a lot, but this would have been an opportunity for more people to come. So again, you're very narrow-minded, and as far as getting this notice out, it's really not a public notice if only a small amount of people see it. Thank you.
May I ask a question? What is the public notice for?
Hearing on adoption of the proposed 2019 budget for the Littleton Riverfront Authority.
Okay. Thank you.
Littleton Invest for tomorrow. Because I'm sure you guys would love some feedback, but you can't have feedback if people don't know about it.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else?
Oh, there it is.
Okay, we will close this session of public comment at this time. At this point, I will turn it over to Tiffany to talk about the financials.
All right, good evening, board. I'm going to start with the 2019 proposed budget that's listed first on the agenda this evening. Each year, LIFT is required to review and adopt a budget according to state law. And also, according to the bylaws, we're required to present a budget to the board by October 30th. And so, hence the meeting that we're having this evening and discussing the proposed budget. So just a couple of things that I want to talk about for the budget. And just a reminder, this is your budget, so if you want changes, that's what it is. It's a proposed budget. I basically prepared the budget very similar to 2018's budget. As far as the expenditures for each of the different line items, I think the one thing that is different for 2019 is there is only the general fund and the Columbine Square Fund for 2019. The other 3 entities do not have a budget for 2019 because we refunded all the property taxes related to those entities, and with the exception of Littleton Boulevard, I believe, where we still have the remaining $25,000 that we're holding pending any additional potential abatements for those properties. But we will book that in 2018 as a payable, essentially a refund to the county if there's any abatements, or the taxing entities if there's no abatements. So there will not be budgets for those funds in 2019. They will kind of fall off the radar, if you will. So for 2019, for the general fund, as I mentioned, basically made this identical to 2019. There's an audit charge on there for $1,000, and depending on what happens in 2019, that you may or may not be required to have an audit. We had one this past year, and we've included that in the city's financials as well. We will probably do that again, just by the nature of the entity and to continue that. So I did put in a charge of $1,000 as a charge for that. For professional and consulting, I left that at $14,400. And that is, again, in the event that you were to contract with maybe an executive director or someone like that, in the event that you have some projects coming online that we need some guidance on that. For legal services, I put in $4,500, again, the same as 2018. That's in the event that we have legal counsel that we need to consult with, so to allow for some fees for that. And then in other charges is $7,400, and that's just for miscellaneous things. If there's any trainings that you'd like to attend this year, any minor office supplies that you need, advertising for RFPs, or even advertising for the budget in the newspaper, those are charges that will come out of there. As far as revenues for the general fund, I'm anticipating about $6,400 in interest earnings for 2019. That's based on your current balances. I did account for, the loan payment is due by the end of 2019, and so I did account for a decrease in cash for that in December, but I'm still estimating about $6,400 in interest earnings in 2019. So that's for the general fund. For the Columbine Fund, we still have property taxes that are coming in based on the estimates from the county. It's going to be about $350. As far as sales tax increment, I did estimate $78,000 for the Columbine area. And then on the expenditure side, $5 for the county collection fee, and that's just for them to collect the taxes on behalf of Lyft. The one thing that I did change for 2019 is, in the past we have transferred out the sales tax increment into the general fund. I actually maintained that money in that fund in 2019 in the anticipation that there may be some projects come online and you may have some expenses that we would have to amend the budget for that at that time. But I opted to leave that in that fund for 2019. And as I mentioned, for Littleton Boulevard and the other two entities, there's not a budget for 2019 for those funds. So as a reminder, the budget can be amended anytime during the year. It just takes an action by the council and some advertising to give public notice that that's going to be discussed. So if you have any questions, if you have any amendments, any changes you'd like to make, I'm here to take notes for you. And like I said, it's your budget, so if you have any ideas, if you have any amendments, certainly just let me know.
Some questions.
I think we need to have a motion first to accept the budget, and then we can have a discussion. They would be answered during the discussion part of it, and then we can amend the proposal.
Motion. I'm going to stand present.
I move to accept the budget. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
Thank you. I'm just wondering about the payment we have to give to the city. First of all, our fiscal year is January 1 through December 31st. Is that correct? In funds accounting, shouldn't we have some kind of fund that shows the liability that is due, not only the principal, but the interest? Should that not be part of this fund presentation you have?
Well, that would be on the balance sheet side, and you don't budget on the balance sheet, you budget on revenues and expenditures. But as far as the balance sheet for Lyft, there is a liability of $150,000 for the loan for the city, and then the interest is $2,533.75 currently.
Well, part of our revenue that we're getting in is going to be going to interest, so shouldn't we have an interest category for expenditures?
That would be part of the other charges,
So you
the
included that?
7,400.
Yeah, and we're paying, what, 2%?
It is, let me see, I think it's 0.55%.
I know it's some
what it is.
ridiculously low number.
Yeah. Let me see what it is. The last calculation was 0.65%.
Is it a variable rate?
It is variable. It's, let me find it. Let me find the loan document before I do that exactly.
Tiffany, would you repeat what the interest amount is that we owe?
It's $2,533.75. That's as of 12/31/2017. And we accrue it at the end of the year.
Okay.
So let me see. So the interest was the rate at the 2-year Treasury rate at the time of the advance, but no less than 0.51% per year.
Okay.
And so depending on when the increment was taken, that's why the interest rate varies.
Okay, so in other words, if we don't take any money from the city this year, we're still at the same rate,
Yes.
0.65?
Yes,
Okay. Is it compounded or is it simple interest?
it's simple interest.
Okay, that's great. That makes it very low. Now, you kept the $78,668 in the other fund. When would that be transferred over?
That's going to be a decision for the board to make. If projects come online, you can leave it in there, or if at the end of the year, during the year, you want to transfer that, we certainly can amend the budget. If you want to put it in currently, in the event that you want to do that, then that's fine.
Now, my understanding is that any money that we might have collected on other blighted areas, so-called blighted areas, that we're sitting on right now, could be used for our administration, general administration. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. That's exactly what the statute envisions.
So in other words, are we obligated to transfer the $26,000 to the county?
That's property taxes, so that's different.
Okay. If we had any sales taxes left, we could use it. Okay. The property taxes, we cannot.
The board's already made the decision to refund that in whole to those entities.
Okay. And is it the next meeting that we have to vote on putting the budget together?
It's actually this meeting. Unless you want to table it, I suppose, until another meeting.
I think there might be some interesting things from that you're going to communicate to us.
Not that immediately impacts, this discussion.
But once we pay the city off, we're left with about $80,000, I believe. That's the number we should have left.
So the other thing that has to be, and Steve, please, based on the communication we received, and my understanding is, if we have no debt, we have no authority to remain in existence. Is that a correct statement?
Mr. Chair, if there is no obligations of the authority, then the council could declare the authority's work is done. But we need to be very careful about the use of this term debt. There has been assertions by individuals that debt means that you actually have to have outstanding bonds. That is, again, that question's being litigated, but I don't believe that assertion is a correct reading of the law. I think it's flatly contradicted by the state urban renewal law. A debt for purposes of urban renewal is some kind of either obligation of some form, but it doesn't have to be an actual, quote, debt like we think of in terms of bond issues and things. It does not have to be that. And so it could be a number of different things, would be an obligation that would be valid grounds for the authority to continue.
So we could restructure the obligation to pay the city.
You could
To extend it out if the city was willing and wanted us to continue to exist.
certainly you could negotiate that with the city. Now, I would note on that particular issue, I definitely would have a conflict, and you would have to have separate counsel represent you on those discussions because I would be representing the city.
But that's means to keep going.
Correct.
We could reduce the debt to $5 or something.
Correct. Or have some sort of other obligation, and I would think that obligation would be to a property owner to help them with a project that they want to undertake that we're going to partially fund, through a grant or something. Would that meet that definition?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, yes, you could structure, the urban renewal statute envisions that one of the things you could do would be to structure as part of the plan for plan area for certain public improvements to be made by the authority, and that could constitute a debt. And so there could certainly be those types of projects contemplated in the future by the authority for the Columbine plan area, should it decide to do so.
Any other discussion?
We have an obligation in the loan. It says if we don't spend the sales tax increment in that year, then it gets returned to the city in the first quarter of the following year. And we've not done that. And I believe we have a moral obligation to the citizens of Littleton that we are using their money, and they were guaranteed certain things by the council at that time. And that whole loan agreement is one of those obligations. And apparently council's not interested in collecting the money. We haven't done anything about it. And I think we need to flush that out, and that we need to do that sooner than later. And if the council wants to restructure the loan agreement, then, let them do that. But I believe that I sat in the audience when all of this was going on at the council, and there were obligations made to the citizens in that room that have not been kept. And I think it's worth discussing and figuring out a way that we can either live up to the agreement that we signed or renegotiate the loan agreement.
Before I would make that, especially at this point, I would want to revisit what the loan agreement, I think the whole entire board should have that, review it, and discuss it further. And we can amend the budget at a later time if, as a board, we decide if there are obligations that we need to meet, we can start meeting those at that time, or move forward with discussions with the city on restructuring a loan or whatever we need to do. I would not be comfortable making a decision on that without reviewing those documents. We have several new members on the board that probably have not seen it. I think it would be in the best interest that we get that from Tiffany and we can put it on the agenda for discussion at our next meeting and review that. So at this point, I would not want to entertain any kind of motion to make a decision on that tonight. And again, we can always amend the budget at a later time. In December, we can amend it if we decide we would need to do something different.
The loan agreement is in our document, so everybody does have a copy of it. And I'm not suggesting at all that we take any kind of action on it. I just don't want it to be neglected. And we're talking about budget, so let's put it on a future agenda.
Okay.
And then on this particular budget, Tiffany, we have a videographer, we have printing costs, and, there's some costs that are associated with our function. Are they accounted for? How do we get billed by the city to be reimbursed, so the city gets reimbursed for those?
So this past year, really the only thing that the city has billed Lyft for was the website services. Other than that, I don't recall the city billing anything in addition to that to Lyft.
Would you mind looking into that to find out? Because I know we're supposed to be paying for the videographer and our printing costs at a minimum.
Okay.
And there may be some other, I'd have to go back and look at our agreement. But, and then we can amend the budget if we need to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other discussion?
No, I want to say that Ms. Hooten answered my questions, so I think everything is one should have in front of them for making a reasonable decision about our budget. So I support the budget.
So hearing no further discussion, we'll vote on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next thing is back to Tiffany so she can provide a report on the September financials.
Okay, September financials. So typically each month I just come in and kind of tell you what's changed from the previous month. I will say that we had a lot change in September, and I'm actually excited about it. We actually refunded the $25,000 or the up to the $25,000 to all of the taxing entities. So it was a total of $126,000. $126,028, and I did send out letters to all the taxing entities giving them notice of that, and then we did actually complete the wire transfers. So as far as you're concerned, all of the property tax revenues have been refunded with the exception of the $25,000 that we're holding. So I thought that was really exciting that we finally got to that point. Once we get the last $25,000, I think I'll be really excited that we've taken care of that. So then the other thing that really changed, we did have some bank fees related to that. They're kind of exceptionally high, $180 worth of bank fees. It's $30 per wire transfer. So there were expenses for that. And then also there was for the advertising of the RFP was also part of that expense for September as well. Interest came in pretty good for September. I believe it was $519. So that's pretty good interest for the entity for September. So just to kind of give you a summary, I think all in all, the last page, probably page 8, is probably what you're most interested in. That's essentially the cash balances for the Wells Fargo account and the Collier Trust account. So currently the cash that's being held is $343,414.11. And as I mentioned, we refunded the $126,000 to the entities, and then the big fees and the advertising fees as well. So $343,414.11 is what we're currently holding in cash.
Is there a motion to accept the September financials?
You keep talking about $25,000. Is that $26,310?
It is. There is $1,310 that is actually due back to the county for an abatement that happened during the year. We just haven't actually sent that to the county. I'm waiting for the $25,000, and I'm going to include it in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all property taxes, even though it shows in the fund that it's other, even though on the expenditures, it's revenues so it's an expenditure of the property taxes.
It is, yeah.
I was confused.
Yeah, refund to taxing entity.
I move we accept the budget, or the financial report.
Hey, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of accepting the financial report signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Tiffany. Okay. Next on the agenda was I asked for communication. Over the past couple months since we've had this set up, I've received 6 emails. 3 of them were telling me that I could get millions out of South Africa or something if I sent money.
Did you do it?
No, I did not. The other 2, there's 3 other ones, just quickly. Jeannie Erickson sent 2 emails. One email was indicating she felt that Tracy Huggins with the Denver Urban Renewal would be a good person to have come speak to the board, and that the study session was not advertised last time. The other one, I thought there was one more. What did I do with it? I think there was another one about the study session not being hosted, so just wait. I responded out to them that we'd take it under consideration, and thanks for bringing that to our attention. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Question. I thought the study sessions were closed, or study sessions open?
they're open.
Okay, well, then,
No,
yeah, that makes
executive
sense.
session is.
Okay, right, of course.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, did it just occur to me on the agenda, normally on the budget, there is a public hearing, and I don't recall us opening a public hearing on the budget. What my recommendation would be that before we proceed with this item, that we return to the last item, open the public hearing, take any testimony that there is. If the board then wishes to revisit it, it could entertain a motion to reconsider and then re-adopt the budget. If not, then the motion stands. But I think technically we should have a public hearing.
Yes, thank you. All right, so we'll back it up a little bit. And we'll invite the public to step forward and comment on the budget. And again, please state your name and limit the comments to 3 minutes. Does anybody wish to come forward? Okay, we will close the public comment, and I don't think we need to revisit the motion as we accepted it.
For the minutes, will you clarify which budget motion was this
The
annual?
The annual budget,
Okay.
yes.
This would be on the annual budget, the approval of the annual budget. Technically, there has to be a
There has to
public
be a public
hearing.
hearing.
You've had the public hearing, so the minutes should reflect that there was a public hearing.
So as far as the minutes go, shall I play it out just the way it happened?
You can certainly do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Unfinished business, I will turn it over to Cindy for the website update.
Hopefully we can get the website up here so we can take a look at it. There were not that many changes. Carol's got some changes for it, and she had some changes to it that we put in there that have to do with the redevelopment projects. There's some additional information that will go in there. The other thing that we changed was we changed the street. If you remember right on the very beginning, it's a street. It's now Bellevue, so that it can kind of reflect the Columbine Square area. I'm trying to think if there were any other changes. I think that was it. We're starting to get the minutes and the video are there. And then so that you can actually just go to the minutes and you can click on the video from the last meeting, which I did a couple times, so I know that that's working. Ta-da!
You direct me where you want to go.
Thanks for stepping in and being our technical support tonight.
Sure.
So I think you can see there's a little bit change to the street. I think we need to go to the redevelopment projects would be a good place to go, because I think you can go through each one of those. And there are some that have some additional information that we put into the, if you look at the very top where it shows each of them, actually the blue where you can click on it and that type of thing. So we're putting in the surveys that were done before they were actually made an urban renewal area. So I think we've got some of those in there, and we may have a couple more to put in there. So those are actually changes into it. The minutes, like I said, are, if you look at the minutes, you can say the current minutes, it will have tonight's meeting in there, so that, and then you can also see that we do have the videos. You can click on the videos right with the meeting, so that you don't have to go to another location to find the videos for the meeting. So that's a big change that is really helpful, because I know, like I said, I went through and looked at quite a few of them today just to make sure that I could get the minutes up, and then I could look at the video right there, which was an improvement. I think that's pretty much, I think after we talked about the last time, those are some of the changes that I have. I know Carol's got some things that she wants to make some changes, so we can make those changes too.
Tiffany, can you go back to the last page you were just at? Yeah, the current meetings. So what I'm not seeing, we have a column for draft minutes, but where are the final accepted minutes? Where are we putting those? And should that column just say minutes, and then we indicate whether, when they're posted, that they're draft until we switch out and put the accepted minutes?
I think that's what we had agreed upon.
Okay.
So that needs to be changed.
Okay, do you have all the accepted minutes, that they don't say draft on them anymore?
I'm pretty sure.
As they get approved, I send them to you.
Yeah, I've got them.
All right,
we just
good.
need to change that,
Okay.
so that it.
That's the only thing I'm
it's not
seeing
just
right now,
draft,
is that
right?
those
Yeah.
aren't there, and we just, okay.
One other thing that I think needs to be on here, this meeting was not posted on our website either. And we need to be doing that. And I think one of the things that we should do is go ahead and put in November and December in the slots. So they're there, so when the public goes, they can see that the meeting is scheduled. If it gets canceled, then we can
We
come
just say
back and
cancel,
fill it in.
yes.
But then they know that the meeting, and we've got it posted. So that has to be done, and somebody from this organization needs to make sure it gets done, because we've messed up for 2 months now. So whose responsibility is that?
That would probably be Eric's, and I can.
Well, it's not Eric's
It's
responsibility
not his
to post our meeting. We need to, it's somebody on this organization to inform Eric to do it.
And I think that what I'd like to see too is on the page, the home page that we have, I think that it would be good to instruct him to say next meeting, and it would be right there, rather than, I think it says current meetings,
Yes.
and you can click on it. I think that it should say next meeting and the
Good
date
idea.
and the time. So, and I actually looked for that today and thought, that probably needs to be there. And then you could also put the documents, everything can be there. So that all you have to do is go to the home page. You don't have to go looking through the
That'd be
website. You just go to the home page. You'll know when the next meeting is. You can get the documents that are going to happen at the next meeting and all of that. So, I will get with Eric on that, because I think there can be some conversation between maybe even Wendy and Eric, that can be a process that will get done automatically, so that we don't have to remember to try to tell Eric to do that.
Good.
So we'll make sure that happens, and that we get that on the homepage.
Can I just go down through? Sure. And I can't remember where it is. Cindy, you might have to help me. But in the overview, there we go. It talks about the failure of the Riverfront Authority, and it blames part of the failure on Park Meadows. and Park Meadows was not even around at the time. The riverfront failure was in the 80s, and Park Meadows wasn't around until 1996. So that should be corrected.
That's interesting.
Then, Tiffany, would you go to the Columbine Square tab? The map is not accurate. That's the original map, and I don't think we ever got a map after the amended plan, but there's some of the properties, and maybe Eric is, I know he's talented enough, if we could identify the parcels, that he might be able to change the color on the map so that the parcels that have been excluded aren't showing up. And when you click on the Columbine Urban Renewal Plan, it is loading the amended plan. So the amended plan it's on there twice.
Okay.
All right. So if we could get the original plan tied to that. And then where it says key findings, all of that information is the same information that's in the Columbine Square fact sheet. And that's consistent with all 4 sites. So I'm wondering if we can just eliminate the Columbine Square fact sheet since the key findings are all present on that page. Okay, put the Santa Fe plan up for me, Tiffany, please. Okay, what was it? Okay, renewal plan. Okay, this one is missing the amended plan. So it's got the original. And that's the one I think you do have the survey that could be added. Go to North Broadway, please. And if you click on the fact sheet, which I think we're probably going to be getting rid of, it takes you to a map. So if we get rid of the fact sheets, then that problem will go away. Oh, go back to home. Maybe that's where I'm looking for the next comment. Okay, under news, New Lift website. It doesn't go anywhere really. It's just a repeat. And so perhaps he's got something, or we could put something up there that says, I don't know.
Well, that's the news item right there, isn't it? It's a very
yeah,
short.
but we followed a link to get here.
Yeah.
And it's not, there's nothing new there.
Right.
And maybe we don't have anything there or anything to put
It's just
there.
saying that we just did a new website, that's all.
But if there were a second headline,
Once we have more news.
that
We had
content
more
area
news,
would
we
fill
click
in.
to whatever. That's the news. All the news you need to know right
Okay,
there.
all right. And that's it. That's it.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns? Thank you, Cindy. Next top item is Application Documents Committee Report.
Okay.
And I'll turn it over to Carol at this point.
All right. And on your desk, you have a copy of a Fort Collins Urban Renewal Authority policies and then a submittal requirements from Denver Urban Renewal. Jack and I have not been able to meet to discuss this, the two of us, and I know he's got some research he's done he'll comment on a little later. I would like everybody to read these documents and then read what LIFT has. And what I think you'll see is there's a different approach that each of these have taken. And I think there's some good information in both of them that's worthy of stealing. One thing that I think is worth talking just a few minutes about, so I can explain on page 5 of 6 of the Fort Collins, they have financial parameters. And I believe this document is being updated, or it may have already been updated, but they have 2 classifications at this point for projects, they now have 3 classifications. It's whether it's going to be a creation of a project, whether they're going to enhance something that's already there, or if they have a project that is needs help in accelerating the progress. You know, there's something standing in the way. And so when they look at the different project, if it's a project under the create column, the anticipated max percentage TIF commitment available to support the project, they will give 50% of the TIF that's been calculated or estimated for that project as a lump sum payment at the end of the project once they have validated that the urban renewal project has met the expectations. Or they will give the project 75% of the increment, but it's paid over time. And the paid over time could be, there's some negotiation that goes along with that as well, and I'll get to that in a sec. The maximum that they would give in a lump sum to a project to create would be 75% of the increment. And the reason why they would increase it from 50 to 75 or somewhere in between is if that project, if the developer was willing to do something a little bit extra that would contribute to the overall goals of the city, then they would be willing to negotiate an increase in the increment. And same thing with the pay over time, up to 90%. And then the TIF payment calculation, the lump sum is a fixed dollar amount. It's been determined what that is at the very beginning. So at the end of the project, that's what they get. But if they're going to pay over time, there's a couple of ways it can be done. It can be a percentage of the actual increment that is collected, or it could be a fixed amount that is guaranteed to that project on an annual basis. So if the increment ends up falling short, then what's left for the Urban Renewal Authority is less than what they had planned, because they said that they would give X% to that fixed dollar amount to the project. So if they promised $100 to the project and only 90 came in, they're still bound to give that project $100. So they could be on the losing end. He said they really don't like financing it that way, but it's all a matter of negotiation. The URA cost of capital, what they're saying here is that all of the costs that incurred in borrowing the money is part of that 50%. It's not an additional repayment. And then on the developer costs, on the pay over time, it's limited by the max percentage of TIF commitment available. So there's negotiations involved. And then they have another formula that the total amount of TIF that is given to a project will not exceed 25% of the value of the project. So they've got some real parameters that we may want to abandon, but we may want to talk about. For me, it's just an eye-opener that there's a number of ways to approach what it is that we need to do. And we haven't begun the discussion. So, and I'm thinking, Jack, that we might be able to pull more information together for the group, but I'm thinking it's more of a group discussion, a study session of some sort to really kind of flesh all of these different approaches out and determine what it is that we want to do.
I researched many of the local municipalities in the Denver metro area, as far south as the Springs. Fort Collins is not unique in its approach to capping limits. Other communities do that, but many of the communities have websites that aren't as open as ours, so it's very, very difficult to see what their application process is. A very good website was Golden. And it's a town much closer to our size, obviously. And their approach is, I would consider it Denver Urban Renewal Authority friendly. It's a little bit ratcheted down. But what we're going to have to do is send emails out to the various urban renewal authorities and asking them for copies of their applications since they're not posted, just to see what it is. But a lot of and every city seems to have a slightly different approach based on its politics. So that's not surprising. And the needs. For example, one particular municipality is really hot on improving housing. How they did that with urban renewal, that's a mystery, so we'll try to delve into that too. We're just going to get a lot of different approaches. I tend to agree with Carol that what we need to do is put together a binder that people can take a look at and see if this is what we want. I think one of the things that I'm sensing from the group is that we want to continue, so we don't want to pay off everything and cease to exist. But on the other hand, if we're continuing on and spending money, shouldn't we do something that benefits the public? We need to come up with some kind of formula or some notice of any kind of program that we do, how we're going to approach it.
Benefits the public, if I might add, benefits the public within those statutory parameters that urban renewal has to fit.
Exactly.
Length and so forth.
But one of the cities has the same approach that, when I was doing a lot of research, several of the cities had it. Mr. Developer, do the improvements, and we'll fund you when you get it done. And that's a lot easier approach than saying, well, we'll sell the bonds and then we'll, disperse them incrementally. We might have to sell the bonds in order to provide the lump sum payment, but our risk is much, much less. So if we want to take, for example, that's one of the approaches we could take. So we think we're going to meet sometime during this month. We're negotiating a date right now.
So do you think that we could, next meeting, look at setting up scheduling a study session where you've come with the different suggestions of where we may go with this, with the developer in mind, and then we just sit down and review it and talk about it, and then we can maybe move it to a January meeting item that we adopt those. Or if we have to go a little bit further, so we keep the momentum going. We set some deadlines to get things done. Because the other part of this is, we had the presentation, in the study session from Maureen. There's some very intriguing things there we will probably want to start looking at, and what those might look for us, other than just partnering with a developer, and how we might want to look at those and structure those also. One does not preclude the other.
During the study session, since I was not in attendance, did she provide copies of the applications?
She did not, but I'm sure we could. She's very free with her information. I'm sure we can get those.
I'll have to send her an email because I did not find them on their website.
I'm sure she would be glad to share those.
Kevin, I think we can do that. I think it would be incumbent on us to get information maybe a week prior to the meeting so that everybody has a chance to review the documents and become familiar with them, so we're not starting from scratch.
Correct. I mean, what I would hope to do is you would give a committee report at the next meeting, maybe provide the documents at that point, and we would schedule a study session in the future, so it gives 2 or 3 weeks or whatever we could come up with to look at those and then sit down and go through them as a group. I mean, is that, we would give everybody time to look at it. Kind of like what we've done with the lawyer situation. Sure. Any other questions, comments? All right. So next thing I will report on is some things that I've become aware with the City Council and some requests for them. Attended a study session with that they had Tuesday, where Brian Fink, architect, and I can't remember the name of this group.
Envision Littleton.
Envision Littleton. I'm sorry? Kendra Keefe. Yes, Kendra Keefe. Presented the Envision Littleton was where they're at this point with the whole Envision Littleton and where Littleton sees itself going and envisioning into the future. And then the other was a presentation on master planning opportunities for different corridors in Littleton, one of them being the Bellevue. And City Council seems to be moving towards focusing on Bellevue as a priority and would like, and has asked both of these firms to come to us and present to us this, the entire Envision Littleton, because that's relative to the whole city, the city as a whole, and the master planning corridor for Bellevue would be focusing more on the Columbine Square area, not the whole presentation, because this was quite lengthy. So at this point, we're looking like we'll go into a scheduled study session after our next meeting for these presentations. There may be, if we can't do one of them then, it may be November 1st. I won't be available for that, but I can still schedule that, and then Carol can share that, and you can see that whatever presentation we're not able to schedule after the next regular board meeting. So it's kind of exciting. The City Council seems to be very excited about making some movement on the Bellevue corridor, in particular Columbine Square. And they want to bring you up to speed on where things may be going, and and on the visions. Patrick, do you have anything to add to it?
No, I thought it was well done. I like the fact that Mayor Brinkman has basically said, let's show the owner what we envision, the community envisions for this project, and sort of take the action to do so. So I think you'll enjoy it. They do a cool 3D flyover. I mean, you can go watch this, tonight if you want to. Just watch the replay of the study session from Tuesday night. But I think you'll enjoy it. And it's a first run through, and obviously it's nothing was adopted. It was just, this is what it could potentially look like. And let's not just look at Columbine Square, but let's look at the whole corridor, and let's really make it a focus of Littleton. It's an important part of Littleton.
Yeah. Did you have some new dates for meetings?
It will either there'll be a study session immediately following our next regular scheduled meeting. If one of the firms can't make that, we're shooting for November 1st, and I will put that out.
Just a tentative.
That's
right
just,
now.
if that's needed. Because City Council, they do want to start moving on this. They want our feedback and also the Planning Commission's feedback. The Planning Commission has also had or have.
They will.
They will get the same thing to them. They want to get our feedback, our reactions. They see us, as a partner with them on helping improve this area. So they want us to comment and give them feedback on this area, where they may go in this. And again, especially with the master planning thing, this is just could be. It has not been vetted, contracted, this is just a high level. This is how exciting this corridor can be and much better than what it is today. Their vision of what it could be. It doesn't mean that this is where it's going. But again, what City Council and Mayor Brinkman is trying to do is move this area forward instead of just sitting back and reacting and waiting for somebody to do something. I think Patrick, something that really, they're just trying to be more proactive in this, engaging with property owners and the people in this corridor to really turn this around and mold what Littleton looks like and becomes.
Patrick, have they presented this to the citizens in that part of the community?
The Envision Plan has not, everything was presented on Tuesday night. Obviously, anybody that was in attendance or anybody watching was presented, but nothing else has been presented to the city, or to the...
There's still work ongoing.
This is just a point in time.
Yeah.
It's just a point in time. The City Council wanted, as I understand it, wanted a report, where are you at right now?
Yep.
And that's what this is. This is not fully adopted, that this is where this is the vision of Littleton in the future.
It's being presented as a draft.
It's just a point in time. This is the data we collected. This is where we see things right now. It has not been formally adopted by the City Council.
That's correct. That will happen. Council will get this for their consideration likely in December. There's been an extensive public input process, well over 1,000 comments. In fact, Kendall Keith is in town right now doing more meetings and updating people over what has been done. So there's been, on Envision Littleton, there's been a very, very extensive public input process, and what this would eventually lead to, assuming council adoption of the vision, will be then direction to proceed with the development of a new comprehensive plan, which in most cities is about a year to 18-month process. I think the council's hoping it will be closer to a year. But that's the Envision Littleton. The other will likely come back based on the council direction, with staff having done some very specific staff work in terms of how we would approach these various corridors. And in many cities that approach through what we call a specific area planning process, where again there's a very extensive public participation process that leads to essentially a very detailed plan that forms the basis for virtually future land use, future transportation, future infrastructure, and pretty much the whole gamut of future development decisions within that corridor. We're nowhere close to that. All we're really at this point is council providing some general direction saying, we think that's a process, you ought to come back, staff, with a proposal on how we would accomplish that.
And it was really impressive. It's they were very creative in getting input. They got a lot of input, not just from Littleton residents, but people visiting the city. They were set up at events, different events, so they captured not just Littleton citizens walking down the street or attending an event, people from outside, why are you coming here? Why do you like to come here? And getting that kind of feedback, I think about a third of the respondents of some of the surveys where it was outside the city, which I think is good, and what is the perception. So this is really exciting. I thought both of these presentations were very exciting for the city, and council wants to make sure they share it with us and get our feedback.
That's true.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention, I've seen it in the wild as well. Like this afternoon, notices about the draft plan turned up on Nextdoor, just aimed at city residents, and that was commendable. Since we want to see transparency. That was good.
So the last thing is I sent out earlier this month. There is an urban renewal session down in Pueblo. If there is some cost to that, just wondering if there's any interest to attend that. I'm unable to attend it. I've already, I think, done my max time in Pueblo this year. It's an interesting city, but anyways, I'm not able to attend. I just wanted to find out because we would have to entertain a motion to fund that if there are any board members who wish to attend it.
Do you recall if this might sound like a dumb question, but do you recall if it was on a weekday?
It is, I've got it here.
Thursday, the 8th.
November 8th. We heard from one of the keynote speakers was Maureen Fair, who spoke to us at our study session. So if there isn't, that's fine. I just wanted to bring it up to see if there was any interest.
I just for the record, I'm absolutely interested in training, just not on a weekday. Because a lot of us have day jobs.
I took the, when we did the one that was in, Lakewood, I took the day off,
Right.
I had the flexibility, I could take the day off. I'm not sure what Joe did or Bill did. Bill had to get his own.
Set up a cardboard cutout of myself.
Okay. The steaming cup of coffee. Right. Unfortunately, a lot of these are during the week and during the day. The one last year that some of the board members attended, I wasn't able to. I think you attended. That was during the week also. It's kind of difficult. That's one of the reasons.
Absolutely.
That's one of the reasons why I reached out to Maureen to come to speak to us at a study session. I think it's also a little bit more specific to what tailor our questions.
No doubt.
And I'm open to if there's another person we want to bring in, having that discussion and having a study session with them and having these type of discussions. It may be good when we do the study session on the whole thing with the application process on bringing in what is her name? Tracy, because that's the focus of the Denver Urban Renewal, is more focused on partnering with developers, and they have a lot of experience in that area. Where it doesn't sound like they have the experience in the partnering with the businesses with either a grant, matching grant proposals and stuff like that we were talking with specifically with Maureen. That may be something we want to have a discussion and, as part of that whole thing, bringing in someone like that would help us with that. It might be a good idea. All right. We are in the second public comment. Anybody wishing to make any comments, come forward, state your name, and you have 3 minutes to share with us your thoughts or comments.
Hello, my name is Jeannie Erickson. I live in District 1. I attended all of the meetings regarding the Bellevue Corridor, which there were 3 of them at St. James Church, along with many of my neighbors. I just wanted to bring up the fact that this board has no one asking for urban renewal money. No one. Nobody seems to want it. I don't approve of trying to think of creative ways to give our money away. And I watched the study session that you're talking about on Tuesday. Like the many developers I've seen come in front of planning board and city council in the last 5 years I've been paying attention. This company that was talking about the Bellevue Corridor painted a very pretty picture. It was almost like a 3D movie. It was like, oh my God, look how wonderful this can be. Well, I watched it, and you'd have to tear down about half of the neighborhood, half of Bellevue Corridor, to even get what they were showing on that 3D movie. So it was very unrealistic to me. I do want to say thank you very much for updating the website and making it more user-friendly and changing the picture on the homepage. I do really appreciate that, but I am really concerned about how this board seems to really want to try to spend our money on something when nobody is asking for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Lisa Sacre, District 1. I have been kind of out of the loop because I've been dealing with my mother, illness and death, and so I'm just getting back into the realms of things. But I just happened to notice I think it was City Council's agenda or paperwork attachments that it changed to Vision Littleton 2040. And I thought, that wasn't part of the original plan. And what I'm starting to kind of see is changing the names and of the different plans. And now it was Bellevue Corridor and it's a vision. I mean, it's like, when is it going to stop and let's stick to it? I mean, where did 2040 come? I'm going to be in my 70s in 2040. And so, and a lot of you won't even be here, you know, so 2040 is a long time to be thinking that far ahead when, you know, 5 to 10 years is more realistic. And going up and down Bellevue as many times a day as I do, I didn't see the video, I'm interested in seeing it, but I've also expressed my concern about bike lanes. And I know that I've seen a presentation by a woman who used the Fort Collins urban renewal redevelopment, and it was more or less, let's push people out of their cars onto bikes, onto buses, onto mass transit, and that's what Prop 110 is wanting to do, or Prop 111. 110 is to take taxpayers' money and put it into mass transit or to modal by different aspects of getting people out of the cars. But I can tell you, I can't get out of my car, and I won't take a bus to work because I can't. I could, but it takes me 2 to 3 hours just to get there. It's not realistic. And when you start putting bike lanes down Bellevue, as much as, if you go down Bellevue as many times, it's very dangerous. I noticed over by the credit union off of Home Depot, I happened to be over there today, and I saw bike lanes, and I thought, well, this is new. So I see it coming. I'm warning you that, you know, people don't want to get out of their cars. They don't want to have to tolerate bikes. I fear for bikers because of the danger of them wanting to, you know, you have cars doing this, and people aren't tolerant of bikes. I see it. I'm one of those. But I have to remind myself, safety first. And so as much as I don't like bikers on the road when I'm on the road, because I am bigger, I'm in a van, and I get to, I just don't like going around them. So, but, you know, be conscious of Bellevue and don't change it too much, because you will have a lot of upset people. And being as transparent and honest as you can, because I tell you what, you know where they're going to come? They're going to come to you. They're upset. Thank you.
And our condolences to you and your family. Our condolences to you and your family on your loss.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else wish to come forward? Okay. We will close the public comment. At this point, we are in adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Why don't we just take a few minutes if somebody need, you know, before we start, we go into the study session in case we need to step up, walk out to the restroom, get a drink of water. We'll start again at 5 to 8.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
study session. This is to have a conversation with Moy, is that right, Moy White?
Correct.
Regarding their proposal to provide representation to the LIFT board. While we start, the two of you can introduce yourselves, and then I will turn it over to Joseph to riddle you with some questions.
My name's Jennifer Stenman. I'm a partner at Moy White. Also the co-chair of the real estate section, where we focus on commercial real estate transactions. So my practice focuses on representing a lot of property owners, developers in the whole spectrum of the commercial real estate transaction, including dealing with financing. I also manage our team of real estate attorneys. So in our proposal, I've been identified as kind of the team lead. I'm in a good position to kind of connect the appropriate people to look at different issues that you might.
My name is Vika Chandrasekhar. I'm an associate in the trial section at Moy White, and I don't manage anybody except myself. I try. That said, I think I met with a few of you following the August meeting, but my experience prior to Moy White was working exclusively with government entities, government agencies all around Colorado, dealing with a variety of primarily municipal tort issues. So that's personal injury and basically anything that doesn't involve a contract or a transaction. So I have a little bit of experience that way. I have some relationships with people from this city, including Mr. Kemp, and all around Colorado from a variety of local governments and various levels of government. But my practice primarily now involves dealing with any sort of issue that arises, whether it's in the middle of a lawsuit, prior to a lawsuit, following a lawsuit, and any of that. But all of this to say, I think they picked the two of us because we represent sort of the two ends of the spectrum of Moy White, and you kind of get a lot of different, backgrounds, you get a lot of different experiences of attorneys at Moy White.
So thank you for coming, and thanks for your flexibility. I know we pushed the whole process back a month, and thank you for attending our previous meeting and the one in August. It was a good gesture for you to be here. I'll preface by saying we're not intending to ask for any legal advice at this meeting, so feel free not to answer anything that sounds like it is, or reinterpret it as if it's not an answer. And then as we ask these questions, board members are free to ask questions, follow-up questions. They do all have the questions in front of them, so hopefully if a subject is covered later, it wouldn't be brought up in the follow-up questions. And then feel free to ask questions of your own, and I'll certainly provide some time at the end so you can ask any questions you have of the board. So first, what, in your view, role does urban renewal play in development?
I think it allows for, it allows for some flexibility in areas that may not otherwise attract developers to come and develop, some really neat projects to add to the vibrancy of a city. And it kind of allows that partnership with the city to allow that to happen, where maybe there wouldn't be the financing or the interest in order to do that.
And then if you were counsel to LIFT, how would you define your role as a representative? A very general question, I know, but how would you see yourself as a representative of
Well, I think what Jennifer and I were talking about prior to this meeting is that we really want to be as open and as receptive to questions and problems and, any sort of inquiry or line of thought that the board has or that LIFT has where you're just not sure of the answer. The way we see ourselves, and the way I see my role as an attorney, no matter what it is just sort of being a problem solver, a problem identifier and a problem solver. So hopefully you can pick those problems up before they become an issue. But if you can't, to know how to address them. And for us, I know that Lyft does, for you guys, I know that Lyft does a number of things and has very broad-ranging goals and desires and works within a very specific statutory framework, but also has to consider all these other things, financing and development and marketing yourselves to developers, and basically coming up with ways to implement these solutions. And for us, being sort of the guide and someone to go to along that process, at least that's how I see it, as far as having come to these meetings and seeing what Lyft is about.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think some of the questions we have for you is kind of what you envision needing. I know Steve is in here this evening kind of guiding on process and, answering questions on things that had happened at City Council. I don't know if that's typical or if you need somebody else to serve that role. Those are some of the questions that,
And I can address that now, and I think it'll help us frame the rest of the conversation. So as of right now, we anticipate following a model that some other urban renewal authorities have, in which the city attorney does continue to advise the authority, specifically on matters of governance and other areas where a conflict of interest doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And tonight it came up once in a memo that he sent to us. He identified a possible conflict, and then I mentioned it in the meeting tonight. So they do arise, and we're looking for counsel in those areas where those conflicts arise, and we can't go to Mr. Kemp. Additionally, if and when a project does come, then I think that we will really need our own outside attorneys by our side, working through the law, helping to negotiate draft documents, et cetera, and those are services that, in that situation, Mr. Kemp would be representing the city.
Yeah.
And then as far as, and I think anybody on the board can speak to this, but as far as our goals, and I know you have a couple meetings under your belt, but you see that we're very much asking the questions of what can we do? We only have one area right now that's been identified, and we've worked sort of within a narrow framework of what our idea of urban renewal is, meaning kind of waiting for a developer to come and ask for money, and that really hasn't happened. Not much has happened there. So we're exploring different ways that we can really bring value to the city within the framework of the statute. So that's why we've brought in Maureen Fair. We're talking about bringing in other speakers to see kind of the diversity of what different urban renewal authorities do. And with all those things, if we wanted to be creative in our way of bringing value, come a lot of questions about, can we do that? How can we finance that within the law? And we would need assistance with that. So we're old, but we're new right now, I guess you would say. We're reevaluating a lot of processes and preconceptions that we may have had for a while.
I think that sums it up pretty good. You heard a discussion where we talk about if we start negotiating with the city in restructuring the loan or having a new loan or whatever. Again, Mr. Kemp couldn't represent that. He would be on the other side of the table saying, no, you can't have this term. So we would have to have someone to represent us during that discussion and help guide us through that. Those are the type of things, and Joe is pretty right, procedural stuff, like we ran into tonight with the meeting, can we do this during the meeting or not? Mr. Kemp will still, that's not a conflict of interest, he'll still guide us on that. But when we do get into some of these other areas, we need somebody that will look at it from our interests only and not be conflicted with the city.
Okay. Makes sense.
That's really helpful, actually.
Yeah, that is. And I mean, I think, we have, as we kind of described, we have a broad range of attorneys that are focusing on real estate, finance, general business issues, including governance type issues, tax. So I think we have a really good pool to draw from. Carol mentioned by the water cooler after the meeting, looking at our RFP, her perception was that maybe our urban renewal experience didn't go like super deep. And I think we have folks that have been really involved with urban renewal authorities and also have dealt with like the specific financing mechanisms through their work with clients and urban renewal authorities. I personally represent developers. I come across different financing schemes through that, but I'm not, in these statutes and in this stuff day in and day out. So we would pull kind of from our team. And I think that could work really well. I think one of the things we need to figure out as we move forward is, obviously you guys have a budget for your legal services, and so we need to figure out kind of how that would work and how we can structure that in order to make sure that we're there for you when you need us, but that we're not spending unnecessary time when it might not be necessary to spend the funds on that. So I think that would be an important part of talking through it, because
Do you mind if I make a reference to what we've discussed prior? Because I don't know how involved, how many of these conversations you've heard, but I think the way that we anticipated that is that it could very well, first of all, the chair always has the power to engage you on behalf of the board. But the way that we anticipate most likely that would happen is two ways. First, we know an issue is going to come up at such and such a meeting next Thursday. So we were like, okay, we really could use outside counsel at the meeting next Thursday. The other one is we're at the meeting, outside counsel is not there, which is going to be true most of the time. And a new conflict comes up, a novel question that Steve says, I prefer you engage outside counsel on this. So we come out of that meeting and then we contact you. Here's a question. So that you'd structure that however you structure that.
Sure. Right.
But there are occasions when we can imagine a meeting comes up or a study session or something, and we're like, hey, we'd like you to be there. This is going to be an engagement.
Okay.
So that's before we ever get into things that might involve like an actual project. Hey, let's get busy, and then that's a different kind of engagement that we might.
Now, Mr. Chair, what I would probably see in next year, the two items that I can see where I would definitely have a conflict, and that you will be wanting to use outside counsel, one would actually be the whole question of the loan agreement. And simply because even if the board and the city agree, I would not ask each of you to waive that conflict. I think it's better that you each have separate counsel. The other would be that in any Bellevue corridor implementation, conceivably the Urban Renewal Authority may agree to undertake a public infrastructure project that doesn't require a developer, but again, there would likely be an agreement between the authority and the city. And again, I'd be representing the city on that agreement, and I would expect the authority there would also have a separate counsel simply look at that agreement and be involved in that process. So really, I'd say those, from my vantage point, I would see those as the two items that in the next year I foresee having a conflict and not being able to represent the authority.
That's kind of what I see that may come up on the horizon that would require you to step in and advise us.
So does that give you a better?
Yeah, this is great. I mean, I think this is really helping.
And there may be some time where the board may ask, say, there's something that Mr. Kemp does not want to answer, And it may just be you draft a memo to us saying, here's the question, here's our interpretation.
Sure.
And then we would all get it, and you wouldn't have to be here at the meeting to present it, unless we have, unless, as we read it, I said, well, you know what, we may have some questions, why don't you be here? Those kinds of things. Some of it may just be able to handle in a memo type form, you're giving us your opinion, but then there may be times we need you here for a face-to-face conversation.
Okay, that makes sense.
So you did mention cost effectiveness and the budget, and I'm sure that if the project came along, looking at that line item, that budget might need to be amended, but we're not there yet. Can you explain it? And I know this is probably a question of your management. So how do you manage your team to ensure that we're getting the optimal legal service for the lowest cost or the best cost?
Well, we have a structure where we have associates, we have paralegals, we have partners, and we're kind of all billing at different rates. Depending on what the task is, a lot of times it might make sense, like if it's research or, statute or case law or something that's interpreting a statute, it makes more sense to have the associate doing that at a lower billable rate and a partner kind of just overseeing that, maybe, discussing it and pulling together the concepts. But there are times when a partner who has done something, however many times in their career can be really efficient, even at a higher billing rate. So we just kind of to weigh that and take that into an account. And in addition, we also try to use the best person with the best experience for the task. And we really work as a team at Moy White. We have these different sections that we, call the trial section, the business section, and the real estate section. But really, we work together on a lot of projects, depending on what the issues are.
Did you have the opportunity to familiarize yourselves a little bit with the history of urban renewal in Littleton?
Read the articles and kind of saw some of the history of, what's going on over this past at least 4, 5, 6 more years.
In light of that, what do you think are some of the particular hurdles or challenges that we might be looking at, and is there any way that partnering with you guys as council can help us with those?
So, you correct me if I'm saying anything wrong. Because, what I see, I think one of your citizens mentioned earlier that basically nobody's biting right now. And I again don't know how much you want to engage Moy White to do something like this, but we have a very and so let me identify the problem first, which is that I think that there's perhaps a lack of public awareness and a lack of awareness in the community of developers or people who would be interested in assisting Lyft in fulfilling its goals. But at Moy White, we work with a variety of clients across the country, but more importantly across Colorado, who do a variety of things, who are interested. I think that's the really important part, who have an interest not just in finding a project that makes the most profit, but in finding a project that makes sense for a community. Either they have ties to a community or they want to make the community better. We are a certified B Corporation, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, so I won't bore you if you are, but we commit ourselves to sustainable practices. We commit ourselves to renewable methods of basically ways to use as few resources as possible and to sustain not only environment, but to do it in a way that's financially responsible. And so I think that there's a possibility for a broader network, a broader base to tap into, that Lyft can tap into to try and get to a place where we can start getting into projects, and then, everybody's busy, like you said. we all have a role to play then as well. But that's just one thing that I see that we can potentially help out with. I don't know if Jen has something.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to me, identify the problem as, the lack of public support, and then just really focusing in on a goal and moving forward with that. And hopefully by kind of taking away some of the uncertainty about what you can do and the best way to go about doing it, that will help you guys move forward a little bit faster to the end game.
Dick, if I heard you right, you said you could refer developers to us. Would that not be a conflict of interest?
And that's where I was going to refer to Jen to see if she had anything to say about what I just said.
Well, I don't know if it would, we couldn't represent the developer on a project that, that's working with you. But, I think his point was more that we have a broad network and maybe there's some connections to be made more generally than...
And I would tell you that frankly, because really urban renewal is what we call a conduit financing entity, you really serve to help developers do projects, but maybe perhaps for whatever reason they can't get conventional financing. Many times that's going to start out with the developer's real estate lawyer talking about what are my other options for financing and what are my other possibilities. And so it would be fairly typical for a developer to make that approach initially, even though that real estate lawyer may well not be able to represent them. That usually is how, in terms of whether in this state it's urban renewal, in other states it might be the Industrial Development Authority or other types of entities, but it very much starts out that way.
And we're involved with, real estate industry organizations around town too. So, that's not even obviously a legal service, but just something that we might add.
And I know that neither of you have been involved in depth in a lot of urban renewal, and in the proposal it did cite other partners in your firm who have. But what are some of the experiences that you do have that are analogous or really would complement your work with the Urban Renewal Authority?
My experience that I think kind of relates is not really on the public side, it's more on the private side again. So working with developers and looking at different types of financing that are used to kind of get to the end game, public improvement financing, metro districts, and things like that. So that's really where my experience relates.
My experience is pretty limited to what I would call a pretty broad statute, which is the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, and basically every exception to that act. I've worked in that act for about 3 or 4 years now. There's, while it seems, and a lot of people seem to forget it when they're doing things up until it becomes a problem, I think that having worked in that for a few years, I can identify problems. I can tell you, this will subject you to, or should something go wrong, will subject you to liability or could subject you to liability. But on the other hand, you're perfectly fine to do this other option. That I think combined with the people that we have in our firm with their urban renewal experience who have worked within this framework before, the people that have worked on the private side and are very familiar with interfacing with local government to obtain any number of permits and to work about zoning and to discuss financing and everything like that. I think there's a lot to be drawn from, even if it's not specific to urban renewal projects and urban renewal authorities across the state.
And then specifically with your experience, because the proposal did identify that you might be the individual coming to meetings if we requested someone in attendance. in your experience as a litigator, have you been in a circumstance where you've been attending board meetings or advising a board or an entity on
The most significant experience I had actually was with the city of Littleton in a prior matter that actually ended up going to the Court of Appeals involving the zoning board and the planning commission. And so I had a decent amount of interaction and experience in counseling, and in that sense it wasn't prospective counseling. It wasn't counseling to avoid a problem. It was counseling to try and fix a problem. So at the end of the day, it's a lot of, they tell me kind of do what you need to do and make this go away. And we did. We did. But that's the most significant amount of experience I have. The majority of my experience, to be frank, the majority of the cases that I dealt with and the counsel that I provided actually arose in the context of police departments across the state. So very little overlap, I think, between what we're doing here and.
So what's interesting to you about what we're doing here?
I always think local government is a fascinating and important aspect of our everyday functioning that most people don't pay attention to and don't realize how much citizens like yourselves do by giving up weeknights several times a month to try and do something bigger than your daily life. I also, reading into what LIFT's goals are and what other urban renewal districts have done across the state, I mean, there's just so much to be gained from it, I think, from a personal perspective. Personally, I think it's not just admirable, I think it's important. I think that it to be able to revitalize a community, to be able to revitalize its one area and maybe expand that and create a model for growth, it would be, I think it'd be really fun. I think it'd be really interesting to be a part of that. And it'd be nice to help you guys achieve something along those lines.
Same question for you, since you've been representing developers for...
Yeah, I mean, to me, it relates. I mean, one of the things I love about practicing real estate law is working to build something positive. I started out in litigation early in my career, and I felt like, it stressed me out to be butting heads all the time. But when I got into real estate transactions many years ago, made me excited to come to work. I get to see cool projects come to life and, be kind of I'm always in the background, on it, but that's okay. I just think it's fun. And it is solving problems. I mean, that's what we do all day long. And so to help people solve their problems and get something cool built is really exciting.
And then, have you had any experience drafting or working with intergovernmental agreements?
I have had experience, again, it's representing a developer and dealing with development agreements between that developer and a town, but also I have one developer that I represent that owns a lot of land in the town of Parker. And so I've been working on it for years, and that's involved a lot of agreements with the town of Parker regarding, infrastructure and things that need to be built to get it done, but also agreements between the town of Parker and the county of Douglas, because there's some roads that need to overlap between those two governmental entities, and there was some cooperation there. So even though I was representing the developer, I was kind of involved in the process of how those agreements were drafted and reviewing them and trying to, get favorable provisions for my client.
Coming right up on 30 minutes, so there are still a couple questions in here that I haven't asked. In many ways, I think they've kind of been covered, but does anybody else have any other questions? Have you opportunity to familiarize yourself with the Colorado Urban Renewal Law?
Briefly, I think both of us. Before the first meeting when I showed it up back in August, I did a moderately deep dive into the statutes to try to figure out what was going on, what I could identify as something, that I could like use as like a guiding star to a certain extent of trying to figure it out. And so I briefly looked at it again earlier this week, but as you know, my experience is not really with that, but I've taken a look at it. I've come to understand, what I haven't looked at the case law, I've looked at the statutes. So I understand what the basic framework is, but not necessarily how it gets applied on a day-to-day or on a practical level.
And did you come across recent amendments or change in the last 3 to 5 years with it? Maybe you just...
I didn't notice any, but I didn't.
Yeah, I don't.
Just like history or anything like that, so.
If I may jump in. This is an area that concerns me, is the lack of experience that you have. And what I wouldn't want to see is that Lyft ends up paying for your training in this area. So explain to us how you would mitigate that process. If there's a part of the law or part of the interpretation that we're struggling with or we need direction on, it may take someone who's got great familiarity with urban renewal to spend a half an hour to draft us a memo, where it may take you 2 or 3 hours just to get the basic understanding and then the meter's running. That's a big concern for us, because unlike some of the other urban renewal authorities of cities this size or larger, we just have the one project, and we don't have a lot of finances to spread that cost across. And the more we spend on your services, the less we can invest in our community. So kind of walk us through how you would help mitigate those kind of expenses and address that concern.
Yeah, I think this meeting's been really helpful because it's educated me on what you need. And one of the things I plan to do is go back to the office, kind of revisit with our team and just kind of understand, how deep of an understanding do those other people on the team have of the statute, things like that, and reevaluate. I think if we wanted the work, we would have to put the legwork in up front, not at a cost to you, to get ourselves educated. And we do that for other clients, all the time. We don't charge them to train people. If we're bringing somebody else into a project that needs to get up to speed, we don't charge the client for that time. We just do that. So I think there's ways we can work on it. And I think now having a good understanding of kind of what some of the potential questions and some of the bigger projects that might come up, I think it would be good for us to kind of go back and look at it all, and then you guys, I'm sure we'll have some follow-up questions, and we'll kind of revisit, and we can come up with a plan that would really work for everybody.
And then the final question I have kind of pertains to the relationship. Obviously, we mentioned Mr. Kemp would still be advising, and it seems like you would be comfortable with that sort of a arrangement. And you might just be educating the board on, what your role as an attorney would be, as opposed to saying anything revolutionary. But what, in a hypothetical situation, I'm sure you love, if Mr. Kemp had offered advice or counsel that not necessarily that you perceived as either incorrect or not best in light of Lyft's particular goals, and if we didn't approach you with a question, how would you approach that situation if you encountered something like that?
So I said you didn't approach us with a question? Or
yeah, if we didn't approach you with a question, but you
we just happened to be here and hear that?
Yeah. How long are you gonna...
sentence with all due respect.
I think it's a matter. And I'll let Jen say her piece. I just think it's a matter of professional courtesy. We're never going to always get it right. You know, someone's always wrong in a case. And, you know, you take the good with the bad, you take your licks where you get them, and you take your victories where you get them. But it's really not about, you know, showing off or being on top. I think, like you said, like Mr. Seiler said, you want an attorney, you want counsel that's going to represent Lyft. You don't want counsel that's going to defer to the city or just, you know, sort of take things lying down. You want someone who's going to represent your interests, stand up for Lyft when it needs to be stood up for, correct the record when the record needs to be corrected. And I don't want to speak for Mr. Kemp, but I think that if we were to politely provide our conflicting opinion in front of him, I think he'd be happy to, or I think he's here, and if he thought we were wrong, he'd probably tell us we were wrong too.
I think I would tell you, having worked with many outside counsels for even entities I've represented, obviously there'd be a difference of opinion. My preference would be that you normally don't do that in front of clients. We would probably, the lawyers would all sit down and talk about our differences of opinion. At the end of the day, if it's something that this firm is representing you on, then my advice to you as a client would be that you should take the advice from your lawyers. But I would tell you that normally I don't think it's a very good thing for either clients or lawyers when lawyers are sitting there going back and forth on issues that they really ought to resolve outside the presence of the client. And what you're going to find is if there is a situation and you hire this firm and they represent you and maybe they and I don't agree, we'll get together and we'll talk about it, but it won't be really in front of you. That's not really appropriate. But at the end of the day, if they're representing you, they're your lawyers, and my advice to you would be, you ought to take the advice of your lawyer.
Yeah.
Now, if it's me representing you, then take mine. But if they represent you, I certainly would not be offended. I would expect that you would take their advice, just like the city council, I would expect and hope would take my advice. That's the way the process should work.
I would agree with that, but I also think to a certain extent, I think we'd view it as kind of a partnership, you know?
Definitely.
Right, and we'd work together, you know, when those things came up. I think that was a good way to say it.
I think that's the way I would see it happening. I would think there'd be a phone call or something like, well, why are you interpreting it this way?
Yeah.
Am I missing something that you see that I don't? I mean, it just would seem like it wouldn't be a hostile throwdown in front of us. As entertaining as that might be, this isn't a courtroom.
Well, it's just like, for example, I came here to the city has used for many years Kissinger and Feldman as special counsel. And Ken Feldman and I, if we have something that we don't agree on, we just sort of sit down and talk it through. And that is what I would expect would happen with any firm. That's professionalism. I view myself as a professional. I certainly have gotten to know other firms, including this firm, and I view them as professional. And professionals handle things in a professional way.
I don't have any more questions. Do you have any?
I have one. Do you have any partnerships with bond counsel?
Yeah, we do. We don't have any internally, but we've got folks in other firms that our clients work with that certainly connect you with, yeah.
I'm kind of coming from the same direction you were coming from. And I don't expect that we would rely on you for all the details of the documents that we put together, applications and that kind of thing. But knowing that you don't have a real deep experience with urban renewal, how can you assure me that if you were reading some of our documents that we want to have blessed, make sure everything's the the way it should be, that you have the depth of knowledge to be able to identify what might be right, what might be missing, what should, give us the confidence rather than just saying, well, you can say form-wise it looks good, but the content, are you going to be able to really give us good guidance about the content of these kinds of documents?
I mean, I think, and I understand your concerns, and again, I want to go back and revisit to give you a little more confidence on it, because I think I can be a really good liaison within our firm, but I may not be the one that knows the urban renewal laws inside and out. But we as attorneys, we have an ethical duty to represent our clients, and so we will make sure we have that knowledge and that we explain to you, why we're giving you that advice and pointing to the law that backs that up.
So to be fair with you, I think what I would like to see, and I think what the board would like to see is, to give you a chance to go back to your firm, have these discussions, and then put forth to us what you're going to do to bring yourself up to speed, to give us the confidence that if we engage with you, we're getting sound advice. What the timeline would that be? And I think it'd be fair to you to give you some time to talk about it, and then give us a proposal or a response as to how you see that working out.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I don't see it necessarily as a huge disadvantage, because part of me says, you're eager, you want to learn, and sometimes people work harder to produce and to learn than somebody who's been doing it for 20 years and just goes down the same path that they've always gone. But I definitely agree. I want to hear something back from the firm that either confirms that you've got the backup that you need to do what needs to be done.
Yeah, and we want to make sure it's a good fit. I mean, obviously, that's important to us as well. So,
in the 2 points that Mr. Kemp brought up earlier, on what may be on a horizon. If we start talking with the city about our loan and restructuring that, I think you can handle that very well. I mean, it sounds like your firm has the experience on dealing with loans and this type of thing. You can advise us on those terms and such. But if we get into a partnership with the city where we take on some infrastructure things, that gets a little bit more, what can we do within the urban renewal statute and so forth, where you need to have a little more depth of knowledge to advise us properly.
Sure.
And that's, it's those type of areas I'm a little worried about. Some of the procedural, some of the other stuff I think you can do fine. But if we get into the meats and potatoes of the urban renewal law, that is a little cloudy.
Got it.
And I think we all would like more clarity to give us confidence to move, possibly move forward.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Anybody else?
No, I think we've gotten a lot of the answers. I think I am looking forward to hearing back some thoughts on how best to. This is an extremely esoteric area. So what are you looking at here? It sounds like what you want is a memo of sorts, or something
just some sort of feedback, answering the question, saying, here are the steps that our firm will do to shore up where here's what you would say, okay, within our firm we have these strengths, and this is the experience we bring to the table when it comes to urban renewal that we can go back and tap.
Yeah.
We identified these areas that we may not feel as strong in, and here are the steps we're going to take to shore that area up. For you to self-identify and give us a plan on what you're going to do, I think would instill a lot of confidence.
Timing in mind?
We are already behind our timeline of what we wanted to do.
Well, that was set by fiat.
It happened. I would really like to have this, have this settled by the end of the calendar year. you know, if you could have something back to us before our next meeting, that we can maybe have some discussions on, put it on our agenda or in study session. We'll be in study session, maybe the added agenda there, so it's a little bit more informal. And, you know, if we get it before, a week or so before our meeting, if we want to review it and ask you to come back to discuss that more, that would be ideal. If it has to go into our December meeting, we could do it then.
I don't think it'll take us that long.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna go back and meet with the team and dig into it and get back to you guys quickly.
Can I get one final thought,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman? I didn't mean to interrupt you, I'm
No,
sorry.
you're fine.
But it just dawned on me that if it's not already obvious, it should be said, of course, that unlike hiring a business manager or something like that, we are talking about hiring attorneys. So even if they had no familiarity whatsoever, they have a professional responsibility to learn the law, and they have the ability to read it. So to read and interpret it. So there's a professional responsibility requirement backing up their efforts that isn't the case with most servants that we might engage.
And I would add that if they encounter something that they cannot advise on or feel ill-equipped to advise on, then professionally they have to inform us of that.
And maybe that's part of your proposal. You say you may have relationships with other firms that may have some of the experience that you can say, you know, we need to go to the bench.
Outside.
If we need to go to the bench, you know, we can tap. And sometimes that happens. I mean, you know, I see these other arrangements where professional services. You know, I'm more familiar with the architectural engineering thing, where you do go out and get that when you need it. And if that's part of your plan, then that's fine too. It just.
I just wanted to make the observation.
No.
Do you have any questions for us?
I think our big question was one that we got to ask pretty early on, and I think that really helped frame the discussion, and we'll continue to do so as we go back and talk with the team. So I don't have anything further. I know that sort of our big question mark hanging over our heads.
Mr. Kemp, is there some obvious question?
No, I don't have any questions. This is a study session, so you're not agenda-sized for any action, so whenever the board is...
We can just wander away, is that what you're saying?
Well, you have to adjourn, but you can't just kind of wander out.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your efforts in this, and we look forward to your future response.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Being adjourned.
See you. You get through it, yeah?